I don't need to be the, the damsel in distress, like I'll save myself. Very much that kind of personality. And in a lot of ways, my childhood kind of felt like being a Wendy on a Neverland with like a bunch of lost boys. And so with that, though, I found very quickly that as much fun as gallivanting around with a bunch of guys was, and as much as I was trying to learn culture and language and understand this, this environment that I was in, and I got to become really good friends with so many of the other girls around there, our life experiences and some of our perspectives were just different. And I felt like I missed having somebody who understood what it was like to stand in the middle, to live and grow up between vastly different cultures and perspectives, and to be able to find the beauty and the value in the culture that I had the honor of being raised in, while also understanding that there was value to the culture that I brought with me as well. And not meshing those, but understanding that they meshed within me specifically. So I started reading a lot. I read so much. I remember specifically like just falling in love with things like Anne of Green Gables, as an example. I loved Anne. I loved her fieriness. I loved her desire to read and write. I loved all of this. And reading books like Anne of Green Gables, Chronicles of Narnia, so many of these classics made me realize, okay, when I'm reading these books, even if I feel fairly isolated myself, and there were points where I was very isolated as we moved around in different areas, I realized that with reading these books, I felt seen, I felt valued, and I saw these parts of myself that were not reflected in other people around me, reflected in those books. And it made them feel more valuable. And it even made them feel more valid in a way. My dreams of writing and, my dreams of being able to someday get published, some of these things that even Anne, right, Anne Shirley could relate with. And so I started writing really young as a way to pour out all of the feelings, all of the thoughts, and really just to be able to process through the fact that I had seen so many cultures. I had experienced a lot of different things, and I had grown up in an environment that was especially very unsafe toward women. And so I had seen a lot of my friends being mistreated, and I was in a position where there was very, very little I could do about it. And while I was generally not in that same kind of physical danger, I certainly experienced the fear of it. And I was very, very empathetic. And these were my friends, right? And so I was internalizing, I think, and just feeling so much compassion for so many different life experiences, and felt very, very much like I had no control over how to fix some of these things. And so I did the best that I could. I was a child, right? I did the best that I could. And we did see even just a sense of kindness that came into a lot of these places as they began to understand the idea of sacrifice and the idea of caring and loving and valuing each of us, even if we're unique and even if we're different. But when you grow up in an environment where, a lot of the language is not just verbal, but even, violence or gaining something, or a sense of unsafety, you internalize that, like you carry it with you. And so as I grew older, writing became a way for me to give a voice to those that maybe didn't have one, to be able to allow myself to feel like I had some place to go, to be able to process a lot of the pain that I had both experienced but also seen around me, and to be able to bring a sense of awareness to a lot of these kinds of topics. And as I grew older, and as I ended up coming back to the US and kind of starting my own life and some of these things, I started to see a lot of the same fears and uncertainties and even senses of not knowing how to feel fully comfortable and safe in your own skin, not knowing how to feel comfortable and safe within your own thoughts, not knowing how to trust your gut, not knowing how to understand like who are we created to be? What is the beauty that God has actually instilled in us? And I saw a lot of those same fears that I had had as a child and that I had seen reflected in my friends, when I lived out of the country. I saw a lot of those same things reflected when I moved back to the US. And so as I continued writing, the first series that ended up getting published was a Peter Pan retelling, which at the time I was like, this feels so random. Then as soon as it came out, I was like, Kara, you wrote your like it's a fantasy autobiography. No, just kidding. It's not. But there are so many similarities because of the way that I grew up that as soon as it actually started moving, I was like, duh, I am the perfect person to write this. I am Claire. And so I wrote a Peter Pan retelling slash sequel. It's a 2-book series. The first book is called Dust. The sequel is called Shadow. They're available pretty much everywhere. And they're really fun, and they're also they're fast paced. They have really engaging characters. The main character, Claire, is this foster kid from California whose brother goes missing, and she has to try to find him. And she goes to London, and they have all these adventures in London. But at the core of these books, of this two book series, really what I want to do is I want to approach the idea of how our feelings are real, but they're not always true. And how we feel about ourselves does not actually define our value and our worth. And I was able to use the magic system, fairy dust, that kind of thing, to tie into this idea of even when I feel like I am not valuable anymore, even when I've made a mistake, even when I am feeling anxious, even if I'm feeling depressed, whatever those emotions are, those both do not define me, but they also don't have to push other people away from me. And so as the main character learns how to see even her fears and her insecurities and her anxieties as valuable and being able to actually have a healthy relationship with them, it's part of what allows her to even learn eventually how to fly. So it ties very deeply into like just the metrics of how the story works, but also was a really important mental health element that was both personal to me, but also I had seen, and by this point, by the time that my books came out, I was early 20s and had been working with youth kids and working with foster kids and having traveled all over the world and all of this for years and years by that point. And so these were topics that I wish somebody had spoken to me about more when I was a teenager, but also were things that I had spoken to teens about a lot as a teenager, working with teens as well.